All right, we have moved on to chapter 13. Being it's been 2 weeks, I don't have a good way to transition into this, so I'm just going to go forward. But before I get any further, I need to go back to Daniel. Has anybody had heard or listened to anybody talk about the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, or the that would be a study in itself, or the four beasts that Daniel sees in chapter 7, which one of the things I would Nebuchadnezzar's dream is kind of like how man looks at these kingdoms, and chapter 7 is what God sees in a sense. Man sees something beautiful, God sees something that's hideous. But this is going to be the Cliff Note versions. I want a Daniel 2. Like I said, it's a very interesting chapter. Nebuchadnezzar comes into power. He's got these people that are supposed to be his magistrates and soothsayers that he wants to know if they really can, if they're really worth what they're being paid. So he says, I had a dream last night. But he won't tell them the dream. He wants them to tell him what he dreamed and interpret it. And if they can't, well, he's got a great retirement program. They're going to the slaughterhouse. Well, back and forth, Daniel prays to God and is given the dream and the interpretation. That's the short version. But what Daniel tells him is he saw a statue. The head of gold is him and his kingdom. After him, another kingdom will come up that will be slightly inferior. It was represented by silver. And then another kingdom will come up that was represented by brass. And each of these kingdoms, the value of the metal is going down. And in the last kingdom, it was iron, which is a very strong metal, but it's not as desirable as gold. And then this kingdom, by the time it gets to the feet, it's iron and clay mixed together, which is a mixture that just it doesn't work. I mean, you can't pour clay into iron and forge it and get something. In fact, when you're forging, or see, actually, when you're making something on a mold, you generally put sand in the part you don't want the metal to form because they don't mix well. And in the time of this iron and clay, he saw a rock that just came and was cut without hands, and it came and hit the statue and destroyed it, and that rock became a mountain that consumed the whole earth. What Daniel is telling him is these are four major kingdoms that will come about through the age until the rock comes. The rock being Christ. It's another name for Christ in the Bible. That's the Cliff Note version on Daniel 2. In Daniel 7, in the first year of King Belshazzar, Daniel had a dream. Now, this is later on in his life. Nebuchadnezzar has died. So he has a dream. Four beasts are rising out of the sea. The first was like a lion with eagle's wings. The wings were eventually plucked off, and it was made to stand on the earth like a man. And it was given a man's heart. The second was like a bear raised on its side, and it had 3 ribs in its teeth. It was told to arise and devour much flesh. The third was like a leopard with 4 wings on its back. It also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And the fourth, Daniel couldn't even really find any ways to describe it. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. He does not even have an animal to compare it to. It was dreadful, it was terrible, exceedingly strong, had huge iron teeth, and it devoured and broke into pieces whatever got in its way. This beast had 10 horns. As Daniel was staring at the horns, another horn, little at first, grew up among them. This horn plucked 3 of the other horns out by their roots. This new horn, he further says, had eyes like a man and a mouth, and it spoke pompous, boastful words and made audacious claims. Well, by verse 21, this last horn wages war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of Days arrived. The Ancient of Days came, and this animal was destroyed and given to the fire, and afterwards the saints were given to take possession of the kingdoms. Now there is a point in Mark where the Pharisees say, "Tell us, are you the Christ?" And Jesus refers back to this Ancient of Days in answering the Pharisees as to who he was. But you get down to verses 15 through 28, the vision is interpreted for Daniel. These 4 animals are 4 kings that will arise from the earth. Daniel didn't really ask much about the first 3 beasts, but the 4th beast he asked a lot about. The 4th animal will be a 4th kingdom, different from all other kingdoms. It will devour the entire earth. It will trample it down and crush it. The 10 horns are 10 kings that will arise out of this kingdom. After them, another will arise. He will be different from the first 10, and he will subdue 3 of the 10 kings. This new horn shall speak loudly and boastful words against the Most High. He will persecute the saints, or representatives of the Most High. He will also attempt to change the times and the laws. His reign will last 3.5 years. After 3.5 years, he will be judged by the Ancient of Days. His kingdom and dominion will end, and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole of heaven shall be given to the saints of the Most High. His kingdom, referring to the Ancient of Days, will be everlasting, and they shall serve and obey him. And the thing that Daniel ends this chapter with, "My thoughts greatly troubled me, and my countenance changed, but I kept the matter to myself." Of course, he wrote it down at some point, but he was very bothered by this vision. I mean, that was the Cliff Note version. I do encourage reading it, getting the whole thing in context. But we'd be here another 3 or 4 weeks studying all that.
This time, it became a period of time when people, they didn't see, all they were seeing is what other nations could do to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was dreadful, and they were under bondage, and they did bad things to them, all that. They had never seen what was about to happen.
Mm-mm.
It's going to be satanic, like no one's ever seen before. And I think he got a vision of that, and it was opened up to him to be able to see that.
If you go to chapter 12, there are several of his visions. He does not fully understand everything he's seeing. It's beyond what he can understand.
We're looking at, we got Russia and China and all that's got us concerned, and it's shaping our nation guys concerned that there's even a greater thing going on that is in the invisible realm, in the spiritual realm? It's creeping up on us, and the closer you get to God, the more you feel it.
Yeah, it is. But now the reason I went through all that backstory is so I can get into chapter 13. Let's see.
Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name.
You start hearing references back to what I just went over. Then I stood on the stand of the seas, that is a textual variant. Some of the texts are saying that it's better translated than he stood on the sands of the sea, referring to John sees the beast standing. And in some Bibles, this first part here will be the last verse of the previous chapter. Now, chapter divisions didn't come about till about the 1500s. Like I've said before, none of the Bible was wrote chapter 1, verse 1, verse 2, verse 3. So, if you get like the Tree of Life version or the Good News Bible, it will say, and the dragon stood on the seashore, and I believe it will be the end of chapter 12. And chapter 13 will start, and I saw the beast. No big deal, but the sea is often used as an idiom for the people or the nations in the Bible. Isaiah 57:20, but the wicked are like the troubled seas when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. Isaiah 17:12, woe to the multitudes of many people who make a noise like the roar of the seas and the rushing of nations that make a rushing like a mighty waters. And then in Revelation 17:15, the harlot, she sits on many waters. So this beast is coming out of the nations. It's coming out of the sea of people, in a sense. Having 7 heads and 10 horns refers back to chapter 12, verse 3, and it also refers back to Daniel 7:7. In Daniel 7, the 10 horns represented 10 rulers. In Revelation 17:12, we'll find that they are waiting for their kingdom, and that their job is to give it to this beast.
Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority.
See, now we have a combination of the animals that Daniel saw in chapter 7 all conglomerated into one thing. The lion communicates arrogance. The bear controls extensively, and the leopard conquers swiftly. I think the leopard was Alexander the Great, who conquered the whole known world before he was 34. And history records he never lost a battle. Everywhere he went, he succeeded. In fact, Julius Caesar at several points cried because he couldn't be, he compared himself to Alexander the Great and how successful he was, and he wanted to be as successful as Alexander in his Gallic wars. In Luke chapter 4, verse 5 through 8, It's when Jesus is being tested. Satan offers Jesus the kingdoms of the world if Jesus would worship Satan. Jesus refuses and responds with the Bible, Old Testament verses. But it alludes to, and it's later in John 5:43, Jesus alludes to another who will come in his own name. He will accept this offer. This is what we know of as the beast in Revelation 13. Most of the time you've probably heard him called the Antichrist, which biblically a better name is Mr. Big Mouth, but Christendom has latched on to that word, the Antichrist, and it fits, but there are better names in the Bible.
And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast.
Is this referring to a government or a person or both? I think it's both. As we progress through this chapter, it's going to focus more and more down to referring to a person. But as I'll use Reagan to keep it a little less political, where Reagan went when he was president, he represented the United States. You know, he was one person, but he was the representative of the authority of the people. So if Reagan met with Gorbachev, the United States was meeting. So, you know, king, kingdom, ruler can kind of get a little, blurry, or can refer to this, you know what I'm trying to say? This head wound is literal to the person. As we move through the chapter, we're going to see that. Like I said, some commentaries see this as representing nations, and I can see that to a point. This is like a revived Roman Empire. Others see this as referring to the beast himself, who is raised, whether real or fake. And that fits with what's going on here, you know. As I get more and more into this, and I may repeat myself, but Satan wants what God has. He tries to copy what God has. Jesus rose from the dead. This guy, there is a satanic trinity here with Satan playing the role as the Father. This guy is playing the role as the Son. Jesus rose from the dead. He's going to try to copy that. Whether real or fake, I will say the people on the earth believe it to be real. You know, there are some problems theologically with it being real, because only God has the power to raise somebody from the dead.
Would that go back to that time period that God already turned people over to a delusion?
Oh yeah, I'm getting there, but yeah, this is that delusion. So I think in the Left Behind series, they had Satan indwelling this guy to answer the resurrection. In the text, it says he was wounded. It doesn't exactly say that he died, but the people believe he did. Beyond that, I'll let y'all thresh out. Now, I pulled this verse out of the Old Testament. I encourage reading the whole chapter. But woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock. The sword shall be upon his arm and upon his right eye. His arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. This is possibly a reference in the Old Testament to the wounds that this guy will suffer. The idol, other verses, other versions translate the word idol as the worthless shepherd. The Greek, Hebrew word, he's good for nothing, he's vain, vanity, or specifically an idol, nothing of value. Yeah, this is
IDOL is actually idol, but no, it's not saying a slack shepherd.
yeah. This is, I think, the King James, and that's the way they worded it. Newer translations will call him the worthless shepherd, but I think in this case that word conveys, if you pay attention to the spelling, it better conveys what the text means in this case.
People, when they see shepherd, they automatically think Christian. But Satan's type of shepherd himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said,
Now this
he
is,
makes everything God does.
he doesn't take care of the flock. He,
Once he gets you, he leaves you out there.
yeah.
Fending for yourself.
I will get into that in a little bit. Let's.
So they worshiped the dragon and gave authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with it?"
What has Satan always desired? Worship. Be like God. They worshipped this guy and the beast. This is the final form of apostasy, the worship of Satan. For 3.5 years, God is going to allow him to have what he desires at the cost of eternity. This is the ultimate deception, where Satan is worshipped by the world in the place of God, and the Antichrist is worshipped in the place of Jesus Christ. And Christ means Messiah, so the pseudo-Messiah, anti-Messiah versus the Messiah. Who is like the beast? After seemingly rising from the dead, who can make war with him? I mean, stepping outside of what we know out of the Bible, if you watch somebody who had been cut and then he comes back up, I mean, how are you going to kill him? He went and killed the 2 witnesses who nobody could kill. Now something happens to him and he just stands back up just like the 2 witnesses, except he didn't go to heaven. How are you going to make war against somebody? This is like fighting zombies. The world will marvel at this event. I mean, like I said, he was able to kill the 2 witnesses in the last chapter that no one could kill. Now something has happened. He's resurrected himself. Whether real or imagined, the people believe it's real. But go ahead.
How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nation, for you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the star of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farther side of the north. I will ascend above the height of the clouds. I will be like the Most High.
It's just a refresher on what the Bible says Satan's desires are. I'm sure everybody's familiar with those. And the word Lucifer, in Latin, that means morning star or light bearer. So when you get into your newer translations and it says morning star or bearer of light, well, that's what the word Lucifer means. And it gets into, is this a name or is this a description, which happens all the time in the Bible.
Satan's a very tormented being. Just what you said, he's always trying to be like God and just falling short. Just like the two guys you talking about, Alexander Drake and them. Just trying to measure up and just falling short, measure up, falling short. And where, God's omnipresent means he can be anywhere, anytime, all the time. Satan is not. And so when we pray, we can just speak the name of Jesus. He's with us all the time. Where Satan, he knows all those that satanic works, where they'll have to conjure him up.
Hmm.
Which that Samuel was talking about.
The Witch of Endor.
Yeah. And Satan won't walk with you. He won't talk with you. He'll pop in and out.
I mean, you look here, what is this all about? I will, I will. What did Jesus say? It's not my will, but my Father's will. Jesus did what the Father desired. Satan's doing what he wants.
Which in a sense, you can see that in people today. We're very selfish and very fallen.
Well, we come to resemble the gods we worship.
That hurts.
He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemy, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth and blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven.
Here we go back to the 11th horn of Daniel. Here's that tie back to chapter 7. This guy has a mouth. That is the characteristic that, Daniel 7:8, Daniel 7:25, Daniel 11:36 through 38, 2 Thessalonians 2:4. That is what he's known by, his mouth. He seems to always be shooting off at the mouth. We also have a connection back to that 42 months, 3.5 years. Just like Daniel 7 said, this guy's going to be given the world for 3.5 years. Where does his authority come from? Satan. This is the unholy trinity. Jesus got his authority from the Father. The Antichrist gets his authority from the anti-Father. You're going to notice not only is he speaking against those who follow God on earth, he's shooting off about those who went to heaven. His hatred is not limited by this earth. Those of us that have been raptured, he's bad-mouthing us here while we're there. Maybe he's mad because he can't get to us.
But you go by, how they portrayed it. They were the ones, the bad people were taken out. The bad people were gone, but they were bad. We're the good ones. We have to.
There is some, if you get into some of this, Madame Blavatsky and these people who have channeled demons, that is something the demons have told them, is that the people who were heading into the age of Aquarius was one word for it, this time where mankind's going to reach its next level, but those that are holding it back, the Christians, are going to have to be taken out of the world, and these demons have told these people that they are going to do that. It's kind of weird when you get into this new spirituality, new age movements. Madame Blavatsky died over 100 years ago. These are things that demons she was channeling were telling her.
People always make fun of it so much that they don't take it seriously. It's real.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't say it's not real because it talks about biology shows things.
For the first part of the tribulation, this is the guy that came riding in on the white horse in chapter 6. He's played the role of a peacemaker, taking power by diplomacy. Like I said, he's got a mouth. He knows how to talk to people. At the midpoint, his true nature is coming out. Blasphemy of the Most High and the saints seem to be the main characteristic of this guy.
It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation.
He overcomes the saints. Here we go back again. Daniel 7:21, Daniel 12:24, Daniel 11:31, Revelation 11:7. You know, in Matthew 16:18, Jesus said that the gates of hell will not prevail against his church, which some people interpret as Satan's not going to prevail against the church. Well, he's prevailing against these people. In that view, that's another hint that we're not there. You know, we're raptured out. But woe to those who are. Acting as Satan's tool, he will go to war and overcome God's people. Any that do not bow and worship him and his master will be overcome.
All who dwell on the earth will worship him whose name has not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world.
As Daniel was shown this horn, he will devour the whole world and tear it into pieces. Here his power over the world is indicated as he has authority over every tribe, tongue, and nation, ethnic group. All those who do not know Jesus will be under the delusion of this ruler. They will worship him and follow him to his end and share his fate. There are basically two categories. Those in this point, those who worship the beast and those who do not. I think I have put up this slide before, but these are Old Testament references to the Antichrist and New Testament. You know, the seed of Satan, the little horn, the king of fierce countenance, the prince that shall come, the desolator, the willful king, the idle shepherd. I've seen that earlier. In the New Testament, the one who comes in his own name, the man of sin, the son of perdition, the lawless one, the Antichrist, and in this book, he's constantly referred to as the beast. If anybody wants a copy of that, I will hand them a copy of it. The career of the Antichrist. He will appear in the latter days after the rapture. He will be the epitome of all Gentile world powers, those four beasts making up the image. He will control the worldwide political and economic system. He gains power by promising world peace. What is the thing we want today? World peace. His personal intelligence, persuasiveness, and power will deceive the nations. He knows how to talk to people. He will make a covenant with Israel. He will break the covenant halfway through. He becomes Israel's greatest adversary and persecutor. And he gets his power and authority from Satan.
If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads captivity shall go into captivity. Who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints.
Does anybody remember the he who has an ear, let him hear? This time it doesn't say what the Spirit says to the churches. It's calling out for anybody that can listen to what's going on. Gains on this earth are temporary. This time is known in the Old Testament as the time of Jacob's trouble. Jacob being Israel, the father of the 12 tribes. Those who persecute the saints and lead them in captivity will face the wrath of God. They'll have 3.5 years, give or take, to enjoy what they're doing, but they sacrifice eternity. Those who endure, and though the endurance and faith of the saints in this hour of trial is found in the ultimate triumph and judgment of evil, they'll suffer for this 3.5 years, but gain eternity, maybe at the cost of their lives. Many will die. This same truth serves as both an encouragement for the believer and a warning to those who oppose God. There is doom at the end of their brief reign of power. And remember, a couple chapters later, Satan only has a short time to accomplish what he can. He knows his time is short. He's against the clock. So, here's back my chart. Back in chapter 12, we had the woman, the dragon, the male child, Michael, the remnant, the beast of the sea. I just used the name that we all know him by, the Antichrist, Mr. Big Mouth. Now, we got one more player. Before I go forward, I pulled this out of John, and I really, John chapters 14 through 16 is Jesus' last comforting instructions to the disciples, minus Judas, before he goes to the cross. There is a lot of meat in those chapters. I recommend digging hard in those chapters. But this is where Jesus introduces the Spirit, the Comforter. And I pulled from this some characteristics he told his disciples about the Spirit to make comparisons as we go forward. The Holy Spirit, he will be the Spirit of truth. He will be the teacher of things. He will testify of Jesus, the Messiah. He points all things to Christ. He will guide us to the truth. He will convict the world of sin and judgment and righteousness, but I didn't have room for righteousness up there. And the Spirit glorifies Jesus. He didn't, Jesus paid the way for us to be saved. Jesus did the will of the Father. The Father sent Jesus for us to be reconciled. The Spirit is pointing everybody to Jesus, because you got to come to Jesus to be reconciled. There's an inner working there. In my mind, it's like an engine. It's, they're leaning on each other. Through Jesus, you're saved. God sent Jesus so we could be saved. The Spirit's trying to bring people to Jesus so we can be saved. It's got to happen that way. That's how I see.
Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and spoke like a dragon.
Here comes another. In Greek, the word that gets translated in English as another, there's actually 2 words. There's heteros, which means another of a different kind, and there's allos, which means another of the same or similar kind. It means that this is something related to the previous. This is Alos. So there's something similar about this second beast to the dragon and the first beast.
And he exercised all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and caused the earth and those who dwelt in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was he.
In chapter 12, we were introduced to Satan as the dragon. In the first part of chapter 13, we see Satan's servant, the beast, out of the sea operating as the sun. To have an unholy trinity, we need one more part. We need somebody playing the role of the Spirit. In Revelation 16:13, 19:20, and 20:10, this person will be called the false prophet. He is risen out of the earth. Some have taken this to mean that this guy will be Jewish, maybe out of the tribe of Dan. John Walvoord's opinion is that this is pointing to the fact that he is not speaking from above. He's not representing heaven. He's earthly views. You know, he's a prophet represents God of heaven, so he would be speaking of heaven. This guy is not, or speaking from the influence of heaven. Just as the Holy Spirit has equal authority with Jesus, this individual has equal authority with the first beast. This false prophet points people to worshiping the Antichrist. What does the Holy Spirit do? Points people to Christ. Well, this guy's pointing people to the Antichrist. The Holy Spirit calls people to the real Messiah who died and resurrected. And the false prophet calls the world to worship the false Messiah who was wounded and healed.
He performed great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth and to the side of men.
He will have the power to perform signs and wonders to fulfill his deceptions. Remember Jannes and Jambres, who opposed Moses, were able to do some of the same things Moses did. They threw their staff down and it became snakes as well. The great here in Greek is mega. You can probably get a pretty close idea to what mega, I mean, these are big events. And these are many signs, not just calling down fire. I've always felt like this is the reason Jesus constantly warns against chasing signs and wonders. Prophecy, not signs and wonders, was actually Jesus' primary evidence. And you'll see this in Matthew 11, 1 through 6, where John's disciples come up and ask Jesus, "Are you the one, or should we seek another?" And he says, "Go tell John what I'm doing." And then he quotes Isaiah. The miracles that he's doing is in fulfillment of the prophecy in Isaiah of what the Messiah would do. He's not just doing things willy-nilly. He's fulfilling what the prophecy said the Messiah would do.
Now, depending on how you believe that we pulled out before any of this happened. This is talking to the tribulation saints.
Yes.
These are people at sometime in their life, or the Bible's going to be laying around and gone. People pick it up. There's something inside. See, God still created them too. Something inside them is going to say, "Hey, this is wrong." They're going to be looking for guidance. When all this stuff they're giving them today falls short, they're going to start saying, "Okay, I got to get back to basics." Well, and in the back of their mind, they're going to remember the book.
Yeah.
They'll go back, they'll read it.
Well, you got 144,000. You also later on, there's an angel flying around proclaiming the gospel.
Yeah, the everlasting God.
But fire coming down from heaven. Is this a counterfeit copy of Pentecost? The events of Pentecost where the fire came down, and or is this copying Elijah's calling down a fire from heaven in 2 Kings 1:10 through 12? I'll leave that for y'all to figure out. I could see it being both.
Because people have read the Bible, he's trying to show that the Antichrist that their worship is the true believer that they've been reading about. So he's backing up everything that the Bible projected, so they will think that he is the true one.
It depends on how well you know your Bible. Because if you just have a superficial knowledge, well, as Elijah called fire down, now there's talk about Elijah's going to come back. Now this guy's here, he's calling fire down. It's Elijah. But I can pull the verses out and make that connection. I think Elijah is one of the two witnesses, but that was last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago.
He decided those.
Deceived.
Because he deceived those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make all image to the beast, to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived.
See, here we have another reference. This image, this wound is going to become like his identity mark. You know, this person, he was wounded by the sword and lived. It's like he becomes known by what happened. But he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs. And what is he instructing these people to do? I think like a Jew. What's one of the 10 commandments? You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the water. It's repeated twice in the Bible. This guy is claiming, in a sense, to be the Spirit. He's doing these miraculous things, but he's pointing people to violate God's law. If to a Jewish mind, I mean, you're looking for Elijah to come and bring people to God and restore things, and this guy is instructing them to violate. He's instructing them to do what the children did at the bottom of Mount Sinai with the cow.
He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed.
This image will be referred to Revelation 14:9, 15:2, 16:2, 19:20, and 20 verse 4. We're going to see this image referred to again in the next chapters. This is the center point of false religion in this time. God breathed life into Adam. He's breathing life into this image. I see the play on words going all the way back to Genesis. This image will not only be able to speak, but will somehow be able to kill those who do not worship it. How this will happen, I ain't got a clue. The technology exists now that this is possible. A few weeks ago, if you were reading in the news, you had a drone that turned and killed its pilot. The drone almost like took on artificial intelligence and attacked the guy who was supposed to be controlling it. People have wondered over this stuff since it was written. I can see how our technology can play into it, but I cannot tell you exactly how it will play out. I don't think if we're not going to be here, I don't think it's meant for us to fully understand. I think there's something supernatural going on there, but I don't want to get too deep into speculation on it, you know?
He, he calls us all, both small, great, rich, and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the numbers of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is.
Did anybody have any question of what the last? I think the key says like 600, 6, but in Revelation chapter 7, there were 144,000 that were sealed by God. Now the anti-Trinity wants to mark those who belong to him, copying of God again. The word for mark in Greek is charagma, and it means an imprinted mark, a scratching or scar, an etching, a stamp or a tattoo. So the Greek word means this is something visible. Now I know there's been a lot of speculation about chips and all, and that technology can play into how he's going to control the marking, but the Greek, this is something visible. It's not going to be you're not going to have to swipe a hand to see. Everybody's going to know. You're walking through the Yes.
Just as we go get a tattoo today, everyone's getting their tattoo. It's not gonna be that hard to sell to these people.
No. Well, come on, this guy to the populace, he died and rose again. He killed the ones that were tormenting us. The two witnesses, they weren't really tormenting, but think propaganda, CNN. This is what they think.
Yeah, remember, like Israel's numbers, the Jewish numbers, and all that don't look like ours 666. So it's gonna be an emblem, but it's gonna be recognizable. We may see 666, but they may see a bunch of squiggly little.
Yeah. Well, going back to Zechariah 11:17, if that's a foreshadowing of the wound of the Antichrist, then his followers, they're seeking to identify with him. They're taking on his mark. Remember, 666 is his number, his mark, his. It's not your social security number. It's not, all these things that people have made. It's attached to him. Until he's here, you're not going to know what it is. Those who take this mark and worship the beast, at that point, they are beyond redemption. They belong to him. They will share his fate. They are eternally separated from God. Speculation on how he will keep people from buying and selling has been the subject of many books written over the last 2,000 years. How can you keep someone from bartering or trading what they have? It's only in the last 20 years that the technology has been invented that could be used to do this, yet we're not there yet. And if you want to research something, yeah, well, if you want to reach something like, look up the Chinese social credit score and what China is able to do to control their population with it. I'm not saying that that's the mark. I'm just saying the technology and what they're able to do is similar. That's all I'm saying. Many of these books have focused on this mark, and movies. Yet they miss that this is his name, his number. It's not a barcode, it's not Social Security, it's not your bank number, it's his. You're identifying with him. Which means until he's here, you will not be able to take this. So you can't go tattoo 666 on yourself and have taken the mark of the beast. The beast has got to be here before you can identify with him. This is a mystery for the people who are here at this time, so that those who have wisdom will be able to identify and confirm that this is the event the Bible predicted. Until that time, we don't know. We can make speculations, but you got to remember they're speculations. Now, I will bring this up. There are a few Greek texts that have the number as 616. It's mentioned in early church history by several church fathers, Irenaeus being one of them. And Irenaeus, I believe, knew Polycarp, who was a disciple of John. And Irenaeus writes adamantly that he asked, John wrote 666, and he doesn't know why there are some copies that have 616. So in getting into the church writings, I do believe 666 is the actual number, but there is a variant there. $11 o'clock, and I made it to the last slide. That's pretty good. Here's my thing. We filled out player number 7, the false prophet. So these were the 7 players that we were introduced in that are on the scene. The woman, the nation of Israel. She's about to bear a child. The dragon, he's seeking to consume the child. He's got to destroy the child. The child is a threat to the dragon. Satan, the male child, the Messiah, is called up to heaven. Michael the archangel, I think that's kind of obvious. He is the warrior angel who goes in defense of the Jewish people. The remnant is the rest of her offspring, the people who have come to faith in the Messiah, who are scattered throughout the earth in this time. The beast of the sea, big mouth. And the beast of the earth, the false prophet. The false prophet points everybody to worshiping Big Mouth. Big Mouth is serving as the son. The father is, the fake father is Satan. It's that unholy trinity. They desire what God has. They desire worship. They try to copy what God has done. But I'm going to stop it there.